13 and 1531, which are in turn based upon older maps that were still in circulation at the time, showed Antarctica to be largely free of ice. Now that's interesting. So there was a time in history when Antarctica didn't have as much ice as it even has today. They denote with tremendous accuracy and detail the land and the bays and the rivers of Antarctica. So we know this isn't just some gimmick. We know it wasn't just some lucky guess that just roughly, oh, there's the South Pole, Antarctica, oh, look, there's no ice there. No, they go in and look at these maps and they compare them to the actual landscape of Antarctica today, and they say, these are accurate. These are really accurate maps. So how is that possible? Well, it's possible because somebody went there who actually knew what they were doing about making maps a long time ago and recorded it for us. And now we can see that Antarctica did have a time where it was largely ice-free. I'm not saying it was completely ice-free, okay, but largely ice-free. The 1531 map was drawn by French cartographer Orontius Phineas. This map was drawn long before the continent was supposedly discovered in 1820. That's another interesting point of fact. We think it was discovered in 1820, but we have maps from 300 years before that of Antarctica. So what does that tell you? Its author, Phineas, is a well-known figure of French history, having been chairman of the Department of Mathematics at College de France from 1531 to 1555. And he published numerous scholarly works under his name. He even calculated the value of pi to be 3.1410, a figure known to be quite accurate. And he did this before calculators were invented, right? So this guy knows his stuff. The map of 1513 was drawn by Piri Reis, which also shows a largely free Antarctica. He noted that the sources for his map dated back to the time of Alexander the Great, which was 330 BC. He also was an accomplished mathematician and cartographer. So back at the time of Alexander the Great, there was a map drawn of Antarctica, which is now known to be accurate, and it shows Antarctica to be largely ice-free. Therefore, the notion that Antarctica has been covered with a mile-thick ice cap for 680,000 or more years is once again proven to be false. The thesis that ice cores prove Genesis wrong is discredited. When the assumptions in dating the ice caps on Greenland and Antarctica are both proven false, the conclusion is very well established that the methodology of the evolutionists is faulty. Okay, there is something going wrong with their underlying assumptions of how they're doing their work, of how they are interpreting the evidence. And that's what we're called to do as Christians, in our conversations with people. We don't need to be jerks about this kind of stuff, but we got to ask them questions. They come up and say, well, we know the Earth is at least 680,000 years old because of the ice caps at the polar and south polar regions. We know this. They're so thick. The only way that could happen is because over that much time, this ice could be built up. So we just simply ask them a question. How do you know that? Show me the evidence that shows that these actually took this long to form. Because I can show you evidence that shows it doesn't take that long to form, right? We'll get to some of this later when we look at the fossil records too. But, the geological strata of the Earth, right? What's the biggest geographical, what would you call it, geographical landmark, I guess, in North America that people use for dating how old the Earth is? It's a big, long canyon. What's it called? You've been there, you've seen it. The Grand Canyon, right? Okay, they look at the strata of the Earth there and they say, oh, it's so many millions of years old. It took the river that long to carve down below. The interesting thing is, of course, when Mount St. Helens erupted in the 1980s, there was a glacier on top of Mount St. Helens, and obviously during a volcanic eruption, what happened to all that ice and snow? It melted, right? Causing a flood, which carved a canyon, roughly 1/6 the size of the Grand Canyon, by the way, so it's no small thing. It's pretty deep. And if you look at the geological strata of that canyon that formed, resulting from Mount St. Helens eruption, you would say it took at least 500,000 to 1 million years to form. But we know it took less than 3 weeks because we watched it happen. So makes one wonder, doesn't it? Whether or not our way of looking at these things and analyzing these things is all really correct. Okay. Now we could go on to Old Tycho, but we're almost done. Let's see, how much time do we have? I guess we could go on to this a little bit. Okay, Old Tycho. Or any questions, first of all, on the ice core dating? Any questions on that? No? Okay, let's go on to Old Tycho. The second objection to the creation account in Genesis focuses on a famous spruce tree, a Norway spruce called Old Tycho that stands on a mountaintop in Sweden. In the debate, Nye said this tree is 9,550 years old. Nye never mentioned how the supposed age of the tree had been calculated at 9,550 years old, nor did he mention that according to an article in National Geographic dated April 2008, by James Owen, that the tree was 600 years old at most. So that's interesting as well. So where did the 9,550-year-old date come from? It was supposedly calculated by means of carbon-14 dating methods that were used on tree roots found underneath the tree. The argument is that the above-ground portion of the tree has died off numerous times, but the roots stayed alive and sent up new shoots to become new trees. Okay, we see that today, right? If you cut a tree down the trunk, if you leave it, what can happen? Right? New suckers form and it grows back. Okay, they're kind of hard to kill, actually, right? However, carbon dating can only be used on plant and animal matter after it has died. So they're supposedly taking their carbon-14 test from living roots, but you can only do a proper carbon-14 test on something after it has died. So there's something interesting there. So could the roots have survived for 9,550 years without rotting away once the tree had died? I would argue no. It seems as though this argument then is completely made up, an example of quote-unquote fake news. Now hold on, Pastor Quast, do people really make up evidence? Yes, they do, sadly, all the time. And when dealing with Darwinism, Christians need to remember that we are largely dealing with fake evidence. Okay? For example, one of Darwin's foremost advocates, Ernst Haeckel, presented the now famous drawings of various embryos to supposedly demonstrate that organisms retrace evolution in their embryonic development, thereby proving evolution. And I don't know if any of you got this in your high school biology classes, but I know I did. They showed us these pictures, and it was to supposedly give evidence towards evolutionary theory. Okay? You can see a picture here. There's some of Ernst Haeckel's drawings. Okay, of embryos, supposedly, in their stages of development. However, actual photographs of the organisms in Haeckel's drawings, however, have shown that the embryos are actually very different from one another. Respected British embryologist Michael Richardson concluded that these drawings were among the most famous fakes in biology. Okay. Sadly, however, many biology textbooks today still include these embryos as supposed proof for evolution, even though they are known to be false. Isn't that interesting? Once again, I already know what I believe. Don't confuse me with the facts. Okay? We now know from the science of genetics that embryos contain the genetic information for the parent organisms only, not anything else. A chicken embryo is a chicken, dog embryo a dog, human embryo a human, etc. This genetic information does not change, and in the development of any organism, genetics is everything. So even though Haeckel's thesis that every organism retraces evolution is not only false but totally ridiculous, yet still some evolutionists will continue to use it as supposed evidence for evolution. And I actually was just listening to something new on Issues, etc. this past week. They had an encore episode, an old episode, with a fellow who was talking about naturalism, and he brought to light something that I didn't realize. Do you remember from biology in high school, a thing about proving evolution was some moths in England? They were light-colored moths and dark-colored moths, and before the Industrial Revolution, it was the light-colored moths that did better because they said the moths rested on the tree trunks, and the tree trunks were mostly light, so because the moths blended in, then they were less likely to be seen and eaten by predators, and therefore they passed their genetic material on. But then after the Industrial Revolution in England, because of all the soot and stuff in the air, the tree trunks became dark, and therefore the dark-colored moths then, prevailed and became more dominant. And they use this as a thing of saying, see, this is evolution at work, because over time there were more and more dark-colored moths than light-colored moths because of natural selection and all that kind of stuff. I remember reading that. Yeah, those moths. Look at those moths, right? Really fascinating, interesting stuff. However, one minor problem. Okay, by the way, this moth thing is still taught. It's in most textbooks today. They still teach it today. However, it's been known for decades now that, guess what? Those moths, they don't rest on tree trunks. Ever. They don't. To take the pictures that they had in the textbooks, they literally had to glue the moths onto the tree trunks to take those pictures.
I never knew that.
Yeah, I never knew that either.
I've seen that.
Isn't that ridiculous? So it's not out of the realm of possibility or probability even that a lot of this stuff is just made up because people want to prove their position true, regardless of whether the facts really bear it out. They believe it so firmly, they're even willing to concoct evidence to prove their positions.
Piltdown man.
Pardon me?
Piltdown man.
Piltdown man? What's that?
Well, that was supposed to be one of the missing links that was found.
Oh, the missing links, right.
Being a jaw of a pig, I think.
It was a jaw of a pig.
To a different skull and say, well, this is one of the missing links. This is an interim stage of human.
Yeah.
And it was all fraud.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Yeah, the fossil record is, and we'll be examining that more carefully, but yeah, the fossil record is widely abused and misused to try and prove things that just aren't there. I mean, they'll construct entire organism based upon a tooth fragment and a single toe of, they think, one organism, but how would you even know when that's the little bit that you have of an organism? Like, how would you even know that it's the same thing, right? And yet we're supposed to believe all of these things are true. They keep on looking for these missing links, and they keep on getting proven false over and over and over again. So I think I don't want to get into the fossil record today. I kind of want to give us some time to mull on what we've talked about today, think through these things, and remember to just question what those will tell you on TV. I mean, I remember sitting with my kids when they were little, and of course Liam as a boy, is into dinosaurs, right? I mean, every boy's into dinosaurs like crazy, and so we bought these dinosaur videos, and we watched them together, and they were really great, wonderful productions. But of course, what do they have in there and everything? This was how long ago? Hundreds of millions of years ago, right? And we just had to sit and talk with him and say, they say these things on TV and in movies, but we know this just isn't true. Okay, there's no real evidence to suggest that this is how old these things actually are. There's no evidence whatsoever to suggest that. And the interesting thing is they keep on finding evidence of things that are supposedly extinct from millions and millions and millions of years ago, and yet we still find living examples today. Why is that? It's very interesting. You know, they found in Australia, in the outback somewhere, in a very, very remote place, somebody was on a hike or something, they found supposedly some flora, some plants that had been extinct, hadn't been seen since the time of the dinosaurs, they said. You know, from, I forget which era it was, Mesozoic or whatever it was, but it was, you know, millions and millions of years ago, old. And yet here's living examples right there. Well, makes you think, makes you wonder. And the Australian government won't let anybody near there anymore because, of course, they're studying these things because they're so rare, which is fine. I got no problem with that. But it just makes me think that you really think your timeline is correct here? It doesn't seem to add up. So, anywho. Any more questions? Any more points? Should we talk about global climate change some more? No, let's not do that. Pastor's got to keep his blood pressure down. Let's close with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. All right, thank you, everybody.